Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a few minutes of HR and coffee. We appreciate that everybody's busy, but hopefully you have a couple minutes just to sit down and listen to a couple things and maybe discuss a few options. So grab your coffee, have a seat, and we'll get started on this. So today we're going to talk about the hidden cost of losing one employee and what you can do about it. And sometimes we think, oh, it's not that bad. We'll just find someone else. But we're going to dig deep into the different areas and other areas. And I'm going to provide you at the end with a sample calculator in case you've never used one before. But in the meantime, if everybody could go into the chat, and if you want to connect with other attendees, please go ahead and feel free to put your information into the chat, so you can connect with other participants. We want this to be a place where you can network as well. Afterwards, you can always send an invite on LinkedIn or things like that. I went ahead and put my information in the chat, but feel free to also put in if you are looking for someone specific in different businesses or types of positions. You can always add that in here. It's a great place for that. While we're doing that, Kimberly, if you would mind starting the first poll, we'll go ahead and take the first poll. So if you could go ahead and answer when you get a chance, I would love to know what your organization's current annual turnover rates is. Or if you don't know, that's fine. Go ahead and click not sure. I do know some industries are prone to much higher turnover than others. So it really depends on if your rate is good for your own industry, but this gives us an idea of kind of where most of your turnover is. And then the second question is about what type of turnover is most common in your organization? Is it people leaving voluntarily? Are you firing them? Are you laying them off? Mixed? Or if you're not sure, that's okay too. And then the last question I have is, do you actively track and analyze turnover trends? Yes, no, sometimes. It is a good idea because sometimes this can really change your bottom line if you look at your turnover cost, and you can move the needle on your revenue if you take a look and recapture some of those lost costs. And we're going to talk about some of those costs soon. All right, looks like we have about 43% have answered. We'll give it just a few more seconds and then I'm going to go ahead and move on. While we're waiting for people to answer, I'm going to go into why turnover matters. And I'm sorry, my slide there, my title moved down, but first it's productivity loss. So when someone leaves the business who's been there for a while, the first thing that happens is no one else is doing that job as efficiently, hopefully, as that person who left, unless you fire them for not doing their job right. But let's say a valuable employee resigns, maybe without notice, and you don't have someone trained up to take over smoothly into that position. So you have a lot of lost productivity. It also disrupts the team because they're carrying on extra workload while you recruit and retain someone, and hire and train, get them moving and up to speed. There is a financial impact. Replacement costs can be anywhere between 1.5 to 2% annual salary. Sometimes it's a little less for frontline employees as well, but for executives, it can be even higher than that. Profits will shrink immediately because of a lot of the productivity and team disruption. Also with clients, if you have someone assigned as an account manager or working with clients, it can cause you retention risk with your clients as well when you have turnover. So those are things to keep in mind about why it matters. I'm going to go ahead and share the results quickly of the poll. I think we've had enough time here. So everybody can see we had, you should be able to see the answers on your screen. We had under 10%, which is great. Most of our participants have that. A couple of you are at the 10 to 25%, which is normal in many industries. And what type of turnover is most common is voluntary. And these are the ones you have the chance to control. Involuntary is not as most common, which is great. That means you are not having employee problems as much where you have to fire everyone because they're doing a terrible job, right? So voluntary resignation is the one you can actually do something about. So it's great that you have 83% of our people have that as their most, which is wonderful. We also have many people, some people do regularly measure their turnover. Some people look at it occasionally. And if you haven't yet, but you're thinking to, I highly recommend it, especially if you can dive down into it a little bit. Like, what are the reasons they're leaving? And we'll get to that with our last poll at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to um, the next slide here. So the cost of losing an employee. So we have here the first level employee. Let's say you pay them $20 an hour. This is the base compensation for a first level employee. The minimum cost, a very conservative turnover expense estimate, would be about 1/5 of their annual wage. So assume $8,000. The likely cost, including training and full-time productivity replacement, is actually up to $20,000. So if you could retain even one or two employees or 10% of the employees that voluntarily leave, imagine what that could do for your business. How many employees did you lose last year? All right. Let's talk now about a mid-level manager. A mid-level manager is even a bigger impact to the business. They touch a lot more people. They are more entrenched in the knowledge of the business. So let's say you pay a manager or of $90,000 or even 75, around that range. This is about the same percentage. A conservative turnover cost is half their annual wage, and it can go all the way up to 1.5 times their annual wage. So that likely cost could be anywhere from 45,000 to 180,000. And you think that doesn't make sense. That's a lot of money. I only pay so much. Even if I hired a recruiter, it might only be 25% of their wage or 20%. And, we can make do without, but you're missing out on all the opportunity loss of your currently productive employees that will have to shoulder the burden of this manager leaving. And so with that, I'm going to actually share a calculator at the end of this where we dig into the details of what you look at. It's things like lost opportunity, impact on the team, hard costs like postings, time in interviews. How many hours does your management or your HR team spend on interviewing? You have to also think about the on-the-job training. What is that doing to the employees who are on the floor or working and training up the next person? So those are always things. Let's turn and take 1 minute to talk about retention red flags. So those people who are voluntarily leaving, what are some signs that they could be leaving, are thinking about leaving? We've heard of quiet quitting in the last couple of years, right? We've all heard about it. So that is present in quiet disengagement. All of a sudden, someone who they start to slowly drop off and tailor off in their engagement in meetings. Have you ever seen someone go from being very actively engaged and start pulling away? You have to think, what is something I can do to bring that back? You'll need to train your managers on talking to their employees, asking, hey, I noticed you've been a little different in meetings lately. How are things going? And they can ask questions. They can also give feedback. What are some reasons for quiet disengagement? Could be all over the board. It could be things from compensation. It could be family problems. It could be they're upset at you as a manager. They could be upset with their team members, different things. They could not like the new work they've been assigned recently because someone else quit. It can really range the board. So with that, the biggest concern that I want to really point out here is high performer exodus. If you have high performers who are leaving, then it's going to hurt the rest of the team because it's going to take more than one person to cover their job. And this can be a vicious cycle here because if one top performer leaves, then the work gets spread out and all of a sudden you may have more top performers leaving, especially if they recruit them to the new company they go to. So when you see high performers leave, please make sure to pay attention to your other high performers. Have check-in meetings, talk to them, see where their mind is, and this may help you reduce some of that voluntary leaving. If you're seeing more complaints rise about grumbling workload, don't just brush it off. If you just brush it off and not listen and encourage them to see a vision of the future where the workload will be reduced again, they can feel unheard and just start looking because they're upset about the workload and they feel like it's not doesn't matter to you. If there's confusion about your priorities for the company or for what they're supposed to do in a given day, that can also be, they can complain about that. There can also be complaints about not having career growth. We're seeing this a lot. If you don't paint a vision of the future for your employees, someone else will, and they will follow that vision. So make sure you're getting in front of that and painting a vision of the future for them. People will check out mentally way before they actually resign. These signals right here, these red flags really deserve your attention if you want to reduce your turnover. So what can you do about it? Well, have you ever heard of a stay interview? Or maybe you've heard about it, but you haven't tried it, or maybe you have. Um, I recommend doing stay interviews. Ask what's working well. Ask if there's one thing they could change, what they would like. These can be really informal. You can even start with a pilot group at one department if you wanted, or you could target people to a committee and ask them to do it. This will help you identify retention risks. So let's say, oh, I really hate the vacation here. Well, maybe that's worth looking into when you balance it against the turnover cost. And that's where really understanding what goes into your cost of turnover can help you make a good business case or weigh the pros and cons of adjusting things like benefits or pay or time off or flexibility even. Also, scheduling regular check-ins is really important, especially with your high performers or people who have high potential in the company. If you have someone who is critical to your business, make sure they're being checked in with regularly and they are on the same page as you want them to be, or if there's a disconnect, that you address it and hear them. And if they do provide you feedback, to act on it. And if you have an answer, if the answer is no, sometimes that's okay, as long as they're heard and you express to them that the answer is no. So what can you do as a manager or for your managers? First, as you need to train your managers to spot burnout. That quiet disengagement, right? You want them to improve their conversation skills and really work on coaching the employees instead of just telling them what to do. Sometimes that authoritarian leadership really burns people out much faster. They want to have that conversation and feedback so they can improve. And it really helps build trust. Trust is a bank. The employees put money into it, so do managers. Managers have to build that trust with their employees that they're going to be there for them and they're going to help them out when they have roadblocks. Instead of just saying, figure it out, that doesn't help, right? So people often cite, and this is in many surveys that you can see, they leave managers, not companies. So make sure you're equipping your managers with the right tools to help with your retention. The cost of training or coaching for managers often is very small in comparison to the full cost of turnover. So focus on equipping them to have those one-on-one conversations with their team in a meaningful way that really changes how the employees feel. All right, so I am going to share this calculator with you if you don't have one. It really helps you quantify your cost. It is targeted towards a mid-level manager, and it is going to be focused on, it'll have estimates for numbers that'll be in one column. And in the next column, you put in your actual costs, right? You can put them in there. It has some directions at the top, and you can then decide. It really helps you weigh the pros and cons of your investments as a business and look at where you want to put your money in case there are gaps to reduce your turnover. It will help you realize what the cost of turnover is. So as we wrap up here, promise we'd keep it short and to the point. We're going to have one more poll though, so don't leave yet. Retention really isn't just about keeping people, it's about protecting your profit. So if you work on building a stronger culture, it will really help with your retention. This will also make your employees be more engaged, and engaged employees do better with their clients. And so that consistent relationship with your clients really builds the client's trust in the company and builds their loyalty. It also protects your margins, reduce unnecessary replacement, and you will see your revenue increase as you go through this. With that, I'm going to turn on the last poll here. So what do you believe is the primary driver of turnover in your business? And as you put in answers here, we will consider that for future conversations with us. And with that, Kimberly, would you mind opening it up for them to speak as well so we can have some questions and open discussion?
Yes, you can unmute yourselves and ask questions.
Great. Well, we'll start with, does anyone have any questions to start with or things they would like to discuss? I have some topics up here on the board, but I'd really like to open it up to you.
So not enough coffee. Is that
Okay.
why we don't have questions this morning?
Hi, I have a question. This is Amanda.
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. Some of the things you were talking about were manager training, whether it's dealing with employees and things like that. What different resources would you advise us look into to get manager training?
Well, there's a lot of options. And Kimberly, I don't know if you want to kick this off, but I find that there's e-learning and I think a good mix, right? So one, it needs to be a mix of different types of training. There should be top-down training, right? On the job shadowing where they're seeing how their manager is modeling what they want them to do, right? That's one thing. Two is things like e-learning. There's in-classroom training opportunities. Sometimes assessments are really great as well to show them how their communication style might be different from their team. As a team, we were just talking about doing strength finders because sometimes it lets you leverage different people's strengths and not put all the ones that create too much energy for one person onto them, like an energy cost. But any assessment, I think, that's validated is a good assessment because it encourages conversation about communication. But there are specific leadership development training options, and we can talk about that as well. I don't want to just, without knowing more, I wouldn't recommend a specific company. I don't know that I would put that out there. Kimberly?
Yeah, and there are some online training platforms that have a curriculum that you can choose from. Treliant is one of them, and they have a variety of programs. And you can go in and build out a curriculum for a particular manager based on their strengths or weaknesses, or just general curriculum. So those are out there, and there are a variety of them. And also, Amanda, in your awesome payroll system, they have a learning module as well that you can leverage.
Right. And one other thing I thought
Yeah.
of is actually there's coaching, right? You can get one-on-one coaching for that manager, especially if you see this as a problem or you've done a 360 feedback and found they really need some help in this area. One-on-one coaching can be very effective here. And there's platforms that help with that, or you can hire an executive coach or use, consulting hours towards that as well.
There's an
What
executive
else?
coach on our call as well.
Ah,
Yes, my executive coach. Um, does anyone else have any other questions, comments, feedback?
If not, let's discuss quickly because there was a couple people. How do you calculate turnover cost? If you are thinking about doing turnover cost calculations, do you know how to get started? You can run a report if you have a system to show you all the different terminations you've had in the course of a year. And you can very simply divide that by the number of employees you have. And then you want to drill down into it. How many were voluntary? What percentage was voluntary? What percentage was involuntary? Does one manager or one department have more turnover than anyone else on the team? That's definitely a red flag that you need to work with that manager maybe on their turnover specifically. And not that the manager is the problem necessarily, but there could be other factors. But you want to drill down into it and find out really what is driving that turnover. It is if it's different from the average in your business. So that is a good way to get started with the turnover. Does anyone want to share any challenges they're facing right now? All right, let me share the results of this poll. All right, well, primary driver, it looks like, is poor management or culture or personal life challenges. That is one of the hardest ones to deal with, is personal and life changes. You can hire an EAP if you don't already have one. That's an employee assistance program, and they can provide coaching or financial management help to the employees, or they can help them have someone personal to talk to about some of the things they're going through personally. But if an employee if they move, there's nothing you can do about that, right? They're going to move unless you're willing to work with them remotely. There's not a lot of flexibility or things that you can change in your business to change that, unless they have a job that could be remote. That is the hardest one to change. But an EAP can really help them manage some of their personal problems so they don't get overwhelming at work. And EAPs also often offer trainings for your employees, as well as some for management too. And we have other. Other is hard to quantify, right? So sometimes if I have enough data, I like to drill down into, is it specific to compensation and benefits? Well, let's break it out between vacation and comp. Or let's look at personal problems that are like they're not showing up for work because they have 3 jobs, right? Or is it based on them moving out of the area, and try to break those into, and try to quantify which ones are not ones that I can affect, right? Those are ones that I can't change, and focus on the areas that I can move the lever. Great. Well, I see we have a lot of comments in the chat with feedback from people with their names and contacts. So I encourage you all to take a minute, connect with people either on LinkedIn or you can send them an email, and I will definitely send my information out to everybody here. Is there anything else, Kimberly, any words or thoughts that you can share?
No, this was a great first HR and Coffee. We will have these on a monthly basis. We're very excited for you to be a part of the inaugural webinar. So we appreciate you showing up with us, sharing a cup of coffee, and sharing some insights. Feel free to drop some suggestions, or you can message me or Leanne in LinkedIn if you have some topics that you think would be of interest for you moving forward. Yes, there's our little claymation situation. I don't. AI can do anything, right? It made my nose bigger than I wanted it to be. That's like a personal thing of
Same.
mine, but whatever. But
Same.
yes, there we are. So please feel free to drop some topics to us, and we will be happy to, make sure that we curate this so that it is something that is useful moving forward every month.
Great. Oh, I have a question here. I see if we could grab it before. If we could hear HR perspective on working with outside recruiters. Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. I think outside recruiters can be very effective if they can get you candidates sourced very quickly, especially if you don't have the time to dedicate it to it, or if you don't have the connection sometimes. Right now in today's market, depending upon the position, especially with AI, sometimes you get overwhelmed by the number of applicants that are coming through. And so you can hire an outside recruiter to filter through that if you don't have the time to deal with it. What if you opened a post and received 1,000 applications within the first 3 days? How would you even start? Not let alone in a compliant manner, right? Sometimes if you outsource that, it can be well worth your time and effort. But there is a cost. Oftentimes outside recruiters can have flat fees, or up to 33% or even more for executives. So it can be a very serious cost to your business. You want to make sure they understand the job. And you want to make sure that if there is candidates that they're sending that aren't the right fit, you give them good feedback so they can do better in the future. And don't be afraid to ask for negotiation with outside recruiters. Sometimes they will negotiate with you and sometimes they won't. And we have a topic suggestion. That's great. And
Yes.
you know what? In case I think I'll send the, I don't see an option to upload it into the chat for my calculator. So I'll email everyone who registered for the HR and Coffee with the Excel turnover calculator.
You should be able to do it now, Leanne.
Okay.
Try,
Let me
you
see.
can try
Oh,
it.
I
But we,
do see it. Yeah.
yeah. And then we can also send it to the emails because you did register, so we can also send that as well. All right. Well,
Good
thank you so
morning.
much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your morning.
Someone's got a question. Go ahead.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi.
yes. Hi.
Hi, can you hear? You guys can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Kimberly. Yes, I am actually listening to you while I'm traveling, and I wanted to know if the presentation that was discussed would be shared out via email. I thought the information was very helpful.